Hello YouTube, my name is Zadarkus and I welcome you to my list of the best junglers for solo queue. Let's get right into it, shall we? The first champion in my list is Bellow. Thanks to the emulate passive we got now in the jungle, tanky junglers are back to the game and they are having a good time clearing the jungle thanks to the AoE damage, and even in the team fights with the Grom's passive stacking up, you can deal a lot of damage per second, which normally wouldn't be possible. Bellow is someone that actually is loving this, and I had a lot of fun playing him, and to be honest, he is really strong, especially in lower helos where people forget to ignite you. Now, the pros about Bellow is that he actually has a high damage if you stack HP, which normally doesn't make sense, but thanks to his bite, which scales off of your maximum HP, you can actually take a chunk of damage from the enemy AD carry. His ganks are actually pretty good if people are overextended, thanks to your throwback, your Q, and then the slow from your E. His passive is insanely good once you got a Warmog and maybe a Spirit Visage. Once the passive goes in, you basically are unkillable unless you are getting bursted really hard or ignited. The jungle clear is actually pretty good now, and it is pretty hard to actually counter jungle him again thanks to his passive and his bite. You need to know that he has a weak sustain at the start, and unless you start with good masteries and runes and get some HP, you may have a hard time. Sadly, he is actually kinda easy to kite if you have some knockbacks, some snares, some slows, since he has no real close gapper like a jump or something like that. He is squishy early game, like I am mentioning, and the ignite can make him die. Therefore, I strongly suggest you to farm at least the first couple of levels and get the core item. And again, if you get bursted really fast before your passive kicks in, you may actually die. But if you snowball, you will become immortal and carry games. You have a little annotation of a montage of me having fun with Bellow, and you can see how strong he may become if you actually get the good stuff rolling in your favor. And when it comes to runes, I normally would say that attack speed, quintessence and marks are a good option, with some cooldown reduction glyphs and HP, scaling HP for the seals. When it comes to the build, of course you want the Cinderhulk for the emulate, maybe go for a rush Warmog, or if the enemy is heavily going for magic damage, go for the Spirit Visage first with the Mercury threads, but mostly just stack up a little bit of HP and try to get the Gromp passive as much as possible. Now let's move to the next champion. The next champion in my list is Nautilus. You may ask me, why should I pick Nautilus? And I'm going to tell you that Nautilus is actually extremely fun to play, pretty tanky, he has a good initiation, he is a pretty gold efficient jungle who can be used to set up the vast and ganks with his vast amount of crowd control. If you're new to jungling, I heavily suggest learning Nautilus, as he is a solid pick for solo queue and team compositions that consist of high damage output versus solo laners, especially assassins, as well as being a great peeler for your carry. Now, Nautilus had a hard time with the previous jungle, and nowadays, thanks to the emulate, he is actually back to the game and his jungle clear is pretty okay. We know that Nautilus has 4 sources of crowd control: his passive, his Q, his Z, and his ultimate, which is actually click on target and not a skill shot, and will hit the enemy champion and knock anyone on the way, which is pretty amazing. And that makes him actually the champion with most crowd control, and without doubt the best jungler when it comes to crowd control. He is as well extremely tanky, and his shield is amazing. His ultimate, like I mentioned, is almost impossible to avoid unless you Zonias, and he actually does not need that much of items. He's not that item dependent, and therefore he is actually pretty gold efficient. He is a great peeler for your carries thanks to his amount of CC, slows, and kinda like the pull from his hook. He is pretty good, and his passive is amazing in team fights. Fast little tip: when you gank, if it is possible, don't try to use your hook at the start. Try to walk to the enemy and snare him with your passive first, and then hook them for more crowd control, because if you risk missing your hook, that's a lot of the gank potential gone. Other than that, if you hit it and if you get some CC down, his ganks are deadly, as you know what I was to say. Anyway, sadly, his damage output is rather low, and he is weak in a team composition that lacks damage. He needs someone to do the damage for him. He is the guy who is going to be in the front of the fight, taking all the hits for you, crowd controlling everybody, but you need someone to do damage. And of course, the ganks as well are heavily reliant of your teammate dealing damage. You need to be a little bit careful if the enemy team picks like aggressive junglers, like for example Lee Sin, Zinzao or Udyr. He is weak against those type of champions if they decide to counter jungle, but other than that, he is pretty strong and he can help you win many games in solo queue, because crowd control is actually a key component. I would suggest some movement speed quintances, maybe some attack speed marks, some armor or HP on the seals, and some magic resist or cooldown reduction on the glyphs. Anyway, let's move to our next champion. The next champion in my list is one we already seen before this list, before this patch, is Sejuani, and I don't feel like I need to tell you about her a lot, because we already have seen her lately quite a lot, and therefore there's not much new to be said. I will tell you the pros and the cons and talk a little bit about her, but not as much as I did in the previous champion. In her favor, we know that she has a good initiation thanks to her ultimate and her Q, and she can keep people slowed down and CC'd for quite a while so your team can catch up, and as well you can use those stuff as a disengage if needed. She is a strong ganker if you do it correctly and don't miss your ultimate when you try to do it. She can do damage even while building tanky, and with the Gromp and the Immolate you can have insane amount of DPS thanks to your W as well. Or your E actually, now I'm confused, I think it's her W, don't take me too serious on that one. Slowly against her jungle clue at the start, it's kinda slow, and she is weak against early counter jungles. She has no real sustain built in her, and your early game is weak. But if you can survive the first couple of minutes, you are a strong team fighter, a strong engager, ganker, and you can help your team a lot. But please try not to miss your ultimate, since it is a key component of your kit. Let's move to the next champion. The next champion in my list is Karim. Yes, the shopper from Earth. We know that he has amazing mobility, he has some decent jungle clear time, he has high damage, a pretty strong late game, and can adapt his build easily. You can go aggressive to carry your team damage wise, or more defensive to kinda help out your carries. Sadly, he isn't that tanky compared to the other junglers, and he has no real hard CC, but he is the type of jungler that getting ahead can just snowball really hard with a Trinity Force and maybe a Randuin just to keep him safe. You can tower dive really easily thanks to his built-in sustain skill that is of course his W, and you can steal Drake or Baron easily thanks to your ultimate And of course it is possible as well to backdoor or split push with him thanks to his mobility again. This is a more aggressive approach if you don't really like to be the tanky guy just supporting your team. You feel like you need to do damage, this is your pick at the moment. I would suggest attack speed for the acquaintances, attack damage for the marks, some armor and scaling HP for the seals, and scaling magic resist for the glyphs. Of course, maybe go with a 21-9 mastery page, but if you feel like your team may need a tank, go with the 921 because it will work on him as well. Now let's move to our last jungler in the list, and he is Maokai. Of course the tree had to be here. Like Nautilus, he had a hard time clearing the jungle, but with the previous jungle nerfs and the emulate passive, now he can be back in the game again, and we know who he is and we know what he does. Really dangerous ganks, amazing tankiness, peel potential, team fight potential, his ultimate is amazing, he has good sustain, he has good crowd control and is very easy to gank with. Just please don't W under the enemy tower and get yourself killed. You can protect your team with your ultimate, which is amazing, and he can actually invade. Sadly, he has low damage past level 9, you will rely a lot on the actual CC and overall peel potential. He doesn't really have that much of a dragon and baron control. I mean, you can steal it with a smite and all that, but it's not like you are a dueler. You can't really go on 1v1 fights unless you are really fed. And you don't have the potential to burst a baron or a drake, like for example a Lee Sin. And he is pretty weak to counter jungle from champions like Lee Sin and Vi, or maybe even Olafs that can deal true damage and avoid your CC. But overall, he is Maokai. The Maokai we see in the top lane is the same almost now back to the jungle. I would suggest you movement speed quintences, attack speed marks, some armor and some magic resist. And of course go with the 921 tree on the masteries, or if you want to go a little bit more detailed, get just the attack speed from the offensive, you get 22 points on the defensive, and you get the extra mobility from the utility tree. This will make my list for this patch, and I strongly think for some of the future patches as well. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember to give it a thumbs up, leave me the comments and let me know what you think. You know, my name has been Zadarkus and I'll be seeing you pretty soon in a new one. Stay awesome.